They told us to stay away, but we didn't listen. At Paranormal M, we chase the unexplained. And what we've found will change the way you see the world. Subscribe now. A dream that stays forever. When I was 15, I had a dream that still comes across my mind 14 years later. I always felt lost, alone, and trapped, and hoping for some hidden message or special secret to manifest, to give my life meaning and validate my hope of, life being worthwhile. Abusive father and teenage hormones. The dream starts with me riding a bike with 4 other randoms. We're in the middle of nowhere, in like the Midwest or something, and there's fields of corn or wheat, I don't know. The kids speed off, leaving me behind, and it's gone from sunset to evening now, and I'm lost. I see 2 classic cars, like lowriders with some cholos. I approached them, asking for directions, and there was a leader. He wore like a light purple Zoot suit, and he just nodded his head at me upon my request for guidance. One of his subordinates came up behind me and kind of pushed me onto my knees, but I wasn't afraid, and I accepted what I knew was coming. I was shot in the back of my head or back, and I don't know. But there was a millisecond of a loud shot and faded black-gray into my vision. Now for a quick reference on the upcoming parts, I think of Kingdom Hearts with the emptiness and nothingness, the train station of brick and gas lamps and a bridge going over to the main tracks. Also, I never played Kingdom Hearts until I was an adult, so there's no way to blame it on playing video games. I woke up in a fog of sorts, faded as, my environment kind of came into focus. I was sitting on a metal bench with Victorian-style lamps. Not the round ones, the ones that were square-like and lit manually. The building was a reddish-brown brick. The green iron railing tracing the footbridge crossing the tracks. I was inside of a train station essentially, but there were tracks that led in different directions. Each exit for the tracks, departing, was a different time of day, like night, afternoon, morning, and the weather varied. I walked around and explored, and I didn't see anyone else, I think, except maybe a little girl and a mom get on a train to leave. The parts after this are fragments, unfortunately. I get on one of these trains at some point, and I'm taken to a place that's all white. The building is a skyscraper, silver and white. The floor and walls are white, and the employees are pale white with bleach blonde white hair. They had gray eyes. This lady escorts me and assigns me to another, younger lady, but older than me, I think. I am told that she used to watch over me, I think, and we go on numerous adventures and trials all in the blink of an eye. I lived multiple lifetimes with this person. Not as my mate, but as a companion or guardian or friend or somebody who was special to me in time. She changed in age, as in got older and younger at the same time. She's telling me that she must move on and let me go, and I'm crying as she holds my face and begging her not to leave me alone. She said you'll never be alone again, and the light is bright and it's foggy, and we're back at the same place I met her, it seems. She crosses over into the light, leaving me alone where I stood, but no longer sad or alone. There was a confidence and lack of doubt in what I was told, but I later woke up and I can remember almost everything about this dream. I cried later telling it because it was so real and reality shaking. My Hatman Situations. When I was in elementary school, I had a dream that my mom took me to get donuts before school. While at the donut shop in my dream, I asked her if I could also have a pack of gum. Before leaving, a tall, shadow-faced being in a long trench coat and a black fedora-ish hat put his palm out to me, demanding the gum without saying a word. I was immediately filled with dread and knew something bad would happen if I did not give it to him. So I did, and I woke up from the dream so scared. I had this feeling in my body telling me he was going to come in real life. Unfortunately, I had that exact pack of gum in my room from a recent trip to the store. I hid it in my play refrigerator, slept in my brother's room for over a week, and we both had bunk beds, so this wasn't really uncommon. Every day I would check the fridge to see if he took it, but it was always there, and I started sleeping in my room again. I never forgot that dream. While some slightly weird things did occur while growing up, I never specifically saw him again. Fast forward to college, about 8 years ago. I'm living in a house with 2 other girls. My favorite of the 3 knocked on my door one day. When I opened it, she asked me, "Who's in there with you?" I said, "No one," and she looked at me like I just told a lie and said, "Whatever," and walked away. I finished what I was doing in my room and came out to see what that interaction was all about. She made me swear I was alone in my room, but didn't believe me. We walked into my room together, and she starts looking around, checking my closet and checking outside the house. All but one of us had doors in our rooms that led outside. My door led to the back of the driveway. It was really easy for me to have guests without anybody knowing. Once she had her proof, I asked her why she thought I was lying. "When you opened the door, someone was behind you." I asked her what they looked like. She said they were tall and wearing a coat and a hat, but she couldn't see their face. My heart fell into my stomach. I didn't explain to her why, but I had this eerie feeling after that. Coincidentally, I watched that sleep documentary on Netflix a few weeks later. It's where they talk about the Hat Man. I had initially watched it due to my experience with sleep paralysis. I had never heard of other people describing the Hat Man before this. I couldn't believe it. I asked my roommate to come to my room and asked her, "Is this who you saw behind me?" Immediately, she said yeah. I didn't tell her about my experiences as a kid, but she learned about them when I shared all of this on my close friend on their Instagram earlier this year. I asked my mom if she remembers me ever being really freaked out by a dream when I was a kid. She told me yes. She said she didn't like the way I talked about the dream. She said I described the figure as a bad man, so she prayed over me. Christian household. Anyway, that's pretty much it. I lived like my whole life with this very tangible feeling of dread, but it left some time in college, I think. My dad and my brother both passed away while I was in college, sophomore year and then grad school. So part of me has always wondered if all of this was connected somehow. When we were kids, my brother told me he thought something really bad was going to happen to our family. We would take guesses as to who we thought would die first and how he would handle it, because he felt sure it would happen sooner rather than later. And he was right. It was him at 21 and my dad 3 years later. That's not a fun thing to take guesses about. Are others having, or have had, contact with shape-shifting, intelligent beings? Here's my experience. This is something I've never been able to fully explain. I'm posting here in hopes that somebody else has experienced something even remotely similar. I know how it sounds, but I was completely awake and this was not a dream. I'm 100% certain of that. It happened around March of this year, 2025. sleeping in my room like any normal night, and I usually set an alarm for 8 a.m. And I'm a heavy sleeper, so I almost never wake up before that. But this day, I was suddenly and unusually awoken. No noise, no dream ending, just snapped awake. It was early, probably 6 or 7, judging by how bright it already was. As soon as I opened my eyes, I saw an effing figure hovering above my legs. Fear hit me instantly, like a shockwave, and I just froze. The being didn't look like the cliché alien or monster. It wasn't really even scary in appearance, but the experience itself was so foreign and overwhelming that it basically paralyzed me. The best way I can describe it is, it had an hourglass-like shape, but the top part was small and the bottom part was wide, maybe 2 feet tall and 1 foot wide. It was floating about 3 or 4 feet above my bed, and it wasn't fully solid. It was morphing. It was like its skin was made of liquid or gel, constantly shifting in slow motion like it was suspended in zero gravity. After a few seconds, a single rectangular limb extended from the center of its mass, as if it were reaching toward me, and then it just vanished. The entire encounter lasted maybe 5 seconds, but it shook me to my core, and I sat up in bed heart pounding, freaked out. But strangely, a few minutes later I started laughing. Not because it was funny, but because something had really shown itself to me. It felt surreal and unique, like I had witnessed something few people ever do. Then 2 days later it happened again. Same time of day, I guess you could call it the same sudden awakening. But this time it was different, at least the entity was different. Right in front of me was something I can only describe as a jellyfish-spider hybrid. It had multiple limbs or tentacles, and just like the first being, it was translucent, almost like it hadn't fully loaded into our reality yet. Once again I froze. But before I could even process what I was seeing, it suddenly launched itself toward my face, and I flinched hard so violently I nearly hurt my neck. And this is the part that confirmed everything for me. When I moved, it hit my pillow instead. I could both hear and feel its limbs tapping against it. The sensation was clear and terrifying. Those were like dozens of soft, rapid taps, almost like the feet of a large spider brushing against fabric. It wasn't violent, just precise and unmistakably real. The physicality of it gave me chills. And let's be clear, I was not dreaming. I know the difference. I was wide awake and I could move and see and think and feel everything with full clarity, just like any normal morning. That alone makes it even stranger. Why did they choose to show themselves to me at the very edge of waking instead of when I'd be fully lucid? So now I'm asking, has anybody else experienced fully waking contact with something intelligent, morphing, or non-human? Something that appears real, even physical, not a dream. I've had other experiences over the years, but these two stand out as the most tactile and visual and real. I've kept this to myself, but I'm starting to feel like I'm not the only one due to, the amount of encounters on social media I see. I realize this sounds completely made up, and I understand if you don't believe me. I'm just hoping that others find this and are motivated to share similar or any experiences of this nature that they've had. Haunted childhood in a Brazilian orphanage. Spirits, protection, and rituals. I want to share something deeply personal and disturbing that happened during my childhood. I grew up in an orphanage in Bauru, Brazil. I was there with many other children, some abandoned, some orphaned like me. place wasn't just sad, it felt strange and heavy, as if something unseen lived there with us. One night, while I'm lying in bed in the dorm, I noticed something sitting on the window ledge. A doll. I was sure it hadn't been there before. In the dim light, I could barely make it out, but its shape unsettled me. I got up step by step, feeling a growing tightness in my chest. The closer I got, the more terrified I became, till it was about maybe a meter away from me. Suddenly, the doll's head turned sharply toward me. I screamed and ran as fast as I could to find one of the nuns who looked after us. I was crying and terrified, and she came with me to the dorm. But when we looked, the doll was gone. There was nothing on the ledge. And that wasn't the only strange thing that happened. One night I went to sleep in the dorm with the other kids, but I woke up alone in a completely different room. No idea how I got there. Doors opened and closed on their own, and shadows moved, and the atmosphere was always tense. We used to hear stories whispered by the older kids that the orphanage had been built on an old indigenous burial ground, that the spirits were angry, and that they were trying to scare us away, or worse. One boy, just 6 years old, died after swallowing powdered laundry detergent. Yikes. Maybe he thought it was candy because of the smell, but I've always wondered if something, did something to him, or forced him to do it. Something dark and unseen. And yet, not everything I felt was evil. Sometimes in the middle of the fear, I would feel a gentle presence, warm and familiar, like somebody was watching over me and calming me. Once or twice, I felt something like a hand on my forehead, invisible, but it felt real. I've always believed it was my parents' spirits. Never really knew them, but that feeling, it felt like love, like they were trying to protect me from the darkness around me. What made things even more intense was what happened outside of the orphanage. Right across the street, there were Afro-Brazilian spirit rituals being performed. I didn't understand what they were at the time, possibly Umbanda or Candomblé. They were people dancing and chanting, lighting candles, and sometimes becoming possessed by spirits. And as a child already surrounded by fear, these rituals terrified me. The drums, the voices, the way the people moved, it all felt overwhelming, otherworldly. And looking back, I realized they may not have been evil at all. Maybe they're trying to communicate with spirits or cleanse the area, maybe even protect it. But to me back then, it felt like I was surrounded by something powerful, both good and bad. The orphanage was alive with invisible force. Some trying to harm, others trying to help, and I was just a scared child caught in the middle. To this day, I still don't fully understand what I experienced. Was it trauma, or was it real contact with the spiritual world, or something in between? If anybody here has had, any sort of similar experience, especially involving orphanages or childhood hauntings or spirit rituals, I truly appreciate your insights. Why are things disappearing? Hi all, I've lurked here for a while, but never thought I'd actually post something. I always thought the stories were fascinating, but I'm a pretty rational, logical person. Not religious, not spiritual, and don't really believe in ghosts or anything like that. But something really strange is going on in my flat. I genuinely can't explain it. I live alone in a small flat in the UK. Nothing fancy, and I work from home, and I'm tidy. I know where my things are, and I don't have people coming in and out of the place. But ever since I moved in, there's been this odd, weird thing, I guess. Towels or clothes I've hung up to dry randomly ending up in different spots. Little things. I joked about it with my girlfriend who doesn't live with me, and we'd just say, "Oh, it's the ghost again," when something went missing or moved, and it was always a laugh. But recently, something happened that I just can't laugh off. Every single one of my teaspoons, and it had 6 or 7, is gone. I discovered this a couple of weeks ago when I went to make a cup of tea, and I couldn't find a single one. I've checked everywhere. I've turned the flat upside down, drawers, cupboards, under furniture, the bin, even places they'd never logically be. Nothing. It's like they were never there. And here's the thing, I never take teaspoons outside. I don't bring food or tea with me, and I live alone. No one's coming in and stealing just teaspoons. There's no evidence of a break-in and nothing else is missing. It's just gone. And this isn't the first time something's disappeared without an explanation, but this is the most specific and baffling one. I know it sounds trivial. Ooh, a ghost stole your spoons. But seriously, I'm struggling to find any rational explanation. Has anyone else experienced this sort of thing? Small, specific items, vanishing with no logical cause. Is there any paranormal explanation for this kind of behavior? Like I said, I don't believe in the supernatural, but I also can't really explain what's going on. Starting to feel like something genuinely weird is happening here. Would appreciate any insight, or even just hearing if anybody else has experienced anything similar. Cheers. Hunting story. When I was 13, I got my first deer at one of my old hunting camps. The camp is located in central Pennsylvania and was built by my great-grandfather in the 70s. He passed away in 2018. I went up there every year for things like hunting deer and squirrel and turkey. My family would also all go up there in the summer, just for recreational activities. It would just be a few people when it was hunting related, so... On this trip, it was my dad, my uncle, and cousin, who's 3 years older than I. I never really enjoyed hunting, until the year prior, and this year I was determined to shoot any deer I saw. On the first day at 9:09 a.m., I shot my deer. It was about 15 feet away from me, but I was using a 30-06 with iron sights. So it was actually a good thing. They waited for half an hour to go find it, and my dad guts it, and we take it out of the woods and near a cabin. The place is decently secluded. There are people a few miles away, so it wasn't terrible. I go back out in the afternoon, and I see nothing. So everybody is done for the day, and myself, cousin, and uncle, we all got a doe. After dropping the deer off to be processed, we prepared for bed, and my uncle and I slept on the couches in the living room. My dad and cousin slept in 2 separate bedrooms. To paint a picture, the main door to get into the cabin opens up into a small kitchen area. It's where there's a wide table that essentially separates the 2 rooms. I was sleeping on the couches, just facing directly away from the door. My uncle was perpendicular with it. The hallway that leads to the bathroom on the left and 2 bedrooms on either side is to my left. The gun rack is also a few yards behind me. I awoke at what I think was 2 a.m. because I didn't want to check my phone. What awoke me was the sound of the wooden door opening in the main entrance. Usually you have to get through this like a very loud screen door before you enter through that door. My uncle was still sleeping, so I assumed it was my dad or cousin going outside to pee. We had to use the bathroom outside because the pipes have to be emptied in the winter or they can burst. I hear footsteps coming around the table and stopping a few yards behind my head. I know this wasn't sleep paralysis because I inchwormed my way into the armrest of the couch, turned my head around to see who it was. And what I saw was probably the most terrifying thing I've seen in my life so far. I could clearly see it tall, like over 7 feet. It was completely black, and it was wearing a white puffer coat. with no other distinguishable features. I turned around and my heart was no longer beating. It was more closely resembling a constant sound because of how fast it was beating. I also noticed that during this time, my uncle, who was a really bad snorer, was completely devoid of any noise. I laid there debating if I should run into my dad's room and grab my knife or make a dash for the gun rack. I thought that this thing was an intruder. Eventually heard footsteps retreat back into the hallway, presumably going into one of the bedrooms, but I couldn't tell. 5 minutes after I checked my phone, I saw that it was 2:29 a.m. My uncle began to snore normally again. When he woke up to stoke the fire, I finally gave safe again and fell asleep. I woke up around 4:45 the next day. All my family was awake and eating breakfast, and I brought it up to them, and nobody seemed to have any problems that night. I still don't know what happened, but I do know it was real. I really do not know what I saw that night. I don't exactly have paranormal stuff happen to me a lot at times, but this one incident that happened to me made me believe in spirits. So this one particular day, I was really sick. I had vomited and had a fever as well. So my mom asked me to take a rest in my room. She was watching something on her phone in the other room, and my sister was with her. It was winter, so I had closed the glass windows of my room. And just to give you the layout of my room, when you enter my room, my bed's situated toward the right side, and just above the bed are the windows. The windows are connected to this long balcony that we have. Okay, so I was resting, and I was feeling nauseous. I was really exhausted. I was just trying to fall asleep, but then I heard knocks on the glass window behind me. I was annoyed because I thought it was my sister, and she had this habit of coming to that part of the balcony and annoying me by knocking there. So without looking, I just loudly said, "Don't do that, I'm sick." But no reply. I heard a knock. Since my body was aching, I shouted for my mother. "Can you ask her not to knock on my window? I'm trying to rest." But then I heard my sister's faint voice from the other room saying, "What is she talking about?" Then my mom replied to me, "She's watching YouTube with me. You must have heard something else." The only thing that came to my mind was, "Wait, what?" And I looked behind, and there was this shadow figure and this mist, but it was visible too. It was very tall, and its upper body was a blur. I ran out screaming, "Mom, there's someone in our balcony," because at that moment, I didn't think it was a non-human thing. I thought somebody had climbed up and was at the window. My mom ran toward the balcony, and I was screaming, "No, don't go back there, he might have weapons." But she still did. She came back after a while and said that she saw no one in her balcony. She even checked the ground to see if somebody had jumped up there, and there's no one. And I was crying. I was absolutely shaken because I couldn't figure out if the thing I saw was real or not. My brother said maybe I was having sleep paralysis. But I know I was up and I could perfectly move my body, and I still really don't know what I saw that day. But nothing like that has happened even after that. House E13. My dad told us the house we lived in 15 years ago was haunted. Being a cop, well, a cop's kid in India, it comes with a fair share of creepy and scary incidents and stories. But what my dad told us a few months ago made me question my memories of our childhood home. Me and my siblings like to listen to our dad's anecdotes, how he solved impossible murders and the usual cop stories. But what he told us this one night, it was different. Might have had a drink or two after dinner, but nothing unusual. As we sat in our living space, we were questioning him about some case he'd solved several years ago. He was posted as an inspector in charge, like equivalent to a precinct captain in the U.S. It was of a national park region, and cops in India get transferred from one area to another quite frequently. Most decide to move without their families, but my father preferred to keep his family close. Well, that's weird. About 15 years ago, he was transferred to a national park, and we also moved there with him. That's the most of what I remember, given that I was only 6. I only have happy memories of the place, and me and my siblings played in the garden with our dog. Us going on safaris, and my time at the local school. Anyways, that night out of the blue, his tone became a little serious as he talked about the house we lived in. I remember it being like any other government-allotted residence in India. The gardens are larger than the house itself, but the space was more than enough for a family and her dog. He reminded my mom how he moved a few weeks earlier than us to make sure the place is clean and renovated. It was next to a jungle. But when he reached there, he was shocked at the sight of the place. The previous inspector chose not to live in the residence for some reason, and the place was not maintained. He described the place in grave detail. 7-foot-tall shrubs covered the entrance and the front garden. The small pathway to the front door looked like a cave. There were vines everywhere, and God, the rats were the size of small cats. Intrigued, we pressed him to give us everything that he knew about it. No, you won't be able to sleep tonight if I did. But we were not backing away now. We had a feeling he was making all this up, but we were hooked and we wanted to know more. The house number was 13. Nobody wanted to take it. My junior officers told me not to move into that place. But my ego was too big, and honestly, I don't believe in ghosts myself. I remember getting a new nameplate for our house. We lived in Lane E, so originally the house was E13. My dad got it changed to E12A. I did think it was a little bit strange, but didn't give it much thought as a kid. I got the place renovated and cleaned up, and it took a couple of weeks. 2 days before you were about to arrive, I decided to sleep in the house. The police barracks were definitely not for me. He continued. My driver and my assistant didn't want me to stay alone. They didn't want to stay in the house either, and after a long conversation with them, they agreed to let me sleep in the house only if I let them sleep in the patrol car outside. I was confused and honestly a little bit pissed off, but whatever helped me get a good night's sleep in my own bed. He paused again. He was trying to kind of talk us out of this little storytelling session, but we weren't budging. Whatever. Just don't come running into our room tonight if you have a nightmare. He continued hesitantly. I moved my stuff into the house that afternoon, and I noticed that they had placed the bed in what should have been the living room. When I asked them to move the bed into another room separated from the front door, they straight up denied. That was the last straw. I told them that they have to do it, or I'll do it myself, because this is my residence now. And they eventually complied. He took another sip of his whiskey. In the evening, the movers left and I decided to go and check in at the station before calling it a day. Something came up at the station, so I asked a constable to go and switch on the lights of the house. It was like 50 meters away from the station. 2 hours went by and he didn't come back. We decided to go back and check on him. My mom was not enjoying this conversation at all. Why didn't you tell me this before? She scolded him mockingly. Didn't think much of it, honestly. At this point, we couldn't tell if he was just joking or if it was true, but we didn't care. Yeah, so we found him passed out in the lobby, but he was a little old, so we thought maybe the heat got to him. He was taken by a doctor, but my assistant and driver were acting weirdly. They did not seem happy, asked me to sleep at the barracks again, and like the last time, I refused. He took a breath and continued. After nightfall, I got ready to go to bed, but something seemed a little bit off. Living close to national parks is spooky enough, but this was different. I brushed it off and laid down in the bed, but a few minutes later, as I stared into the ceiling, I noticed something. The fan. One of its blades was slightly bent. Not something you'd spot straight away, but like a scoop, as if something pulled it downward. A lot of strange scenarios played in my mind as to what could have caused it, but the house was abandoned for years, so I figured it could have been a vine or a shrub or something. I did eventually fall asleep. Don't tell me somebody hung themselves from that fan, I said, half disgusted and half excited. Something like that. He smiled. My mom was not impressed, though. I lived in that house alone with the kids for weeks at a time, and you didn't bother to tell me somebody killed themselves in the house. What you don't know can't hurt you, can it? He replied smugly. So the next day I decided to ask the two idiots why they want to spend the night in the patrol car and not at their homes. They were a little bit tight-lipped initially, but eventually the history of the house was revealed to me. About 5 years before we moved in, the family lived in the residence. A man, his wife, and her sister. One sister hung herself in the bedroom, the other burnt herself in the kitchen, and after that nobody wanted to live in the house. As ghost story buffs, me and my siblings were enjoying every bit of this. I was a little uncomfortable learning all of this, but as a cop, I had seen much worse, and I decided I was going to prove that the house is not haunted. If a family with young kids could have stayed there, anybody could. God, I can't believe this. You're ready to put your kids in danger for the sake of your reputation, my mom retorted. But to be honest, she was herself quite intrigued by this. What danger? Ghosts? You don't believe that. And the house was amazing, perfect for our kids, and had a great time there, he replied. So what happened next? My sister asked. Well, this was the day before you were set to arrive. I decided to sleep alone in the house again. Nothing happened the previous night, so it was okay. I went to bed a little bit early, and the house was hectic, but around midnight I woke to the sound of faint sobs, almost sing-songy, like a woman was crying but singing at the same time. I decided to check it out, and I peeped outside through the front window, and my aides were fast asleep in the patrol car. But the sound was coming somewhere from the back, near the kitchen. I walked through the living room to the lobby as the voice grew louder. And eventually, I stood outside the kitchen, and I made sure to turn on all the lights in the rest of the house while walking toward the kitchen. I looked around in the kitchen, and there was nothing, but I could still hear the voice, and it was close. I looked at my mom. Do you remember a small pantry we always kept closed? Yeah, the pantry you asked to keep closed, I remember, she replied. I leaned around the doorframe and peeped into it, and well, I saw something below the slab. I don't know how to describe it, but it was a figure, a half-burnt woman crouched into a tight space, and she was sobbing. He paused for a moment. We were all silent as well. It was for a split second. I didn't even realize what I saw until I turned my eyes back into the kitchen. I spun around immediately, and it was still there, and this figure, her flesh was burnt red, black, and shades of purple. Her hair was fried, and her head shifted, and her hollow eyes looked straight at me. All right, you got us. Ooh, we're scared, my brother mocked. You know I don't lie. Plus, you were the ones who wanted to know, Dad replied. So what did you do next, I asked. I went numb, quite frankly. I walked back to the bedroom and fell asleep. Left the lights on, didn't do anything, he shrugged. What? You saw a ghost and fell asleep? Yeah. Maybe it was a dream because you had heard the story that day and your mind was playing games, I asserted. Maybe. Or maybe it was indeed a ghost, my sister countered. Maybe. You're lying. I saw what I saw. You can believe whatever you want. And by the way, the old man who lived in the house opposite to us was killed by his son for money a few years after we moved out. He said something compelled them to do it, and might have been lying to protect himself, I don't know. We still couldn't tell if he was lying. Wow, that's crazy. Did you see something again while we were there with you? I asked. Yeah, I heard the sobbing again a few times. I didn't react or wake up and eventually got used to it. Shadows here and there. The house help refused to stay with you in the house overnight whenever I was away on operations. Maybe she sensed something too. That's why I got Buddy. Someone suggested I get a black dog to ward off the spirits. A dog with 3 small kids was difficult to handle, but it was necessary. I looked back at Mom, and she was a little bit pissed, but not enough. You seriously had no idea about this? I did, she replied. Do you remember Monica? The neighbor who tutored you in the evening? Months after we moved out, she called me and told me everything. Your dad asked them not to tell us anything because it could have spooked me out. She looked at Dad accusingly. Worked out well, didn't it? I hated when he's smug. Of course, I'm pretty sure these kids were enough to spook the ghosts out themselves. Now I'm done with this ghost talk, I'm going to go to sleep. Mom walked out of the bedroom. Anything else you want to tell us? My sister asked. Yeah. Remember the house we lived in during quarantine? Well, an inspector died in the kitchen due to cardiac arrest in 2018, I think. He took the last sip of his drink and walked away. Ugh, we all grunted almost in unison. So that was the craziest story my dad's ever told us. I believe him, and I don't know if what he experienced was real. But I do know that his experience was something. He later asked Dad if the house still exists, and we wanted to visit it, but we found out that the house was demolished. It was unstable after years of abandonment. The current inspector also told us that Dad's successor decided to move in. Apparently, he came running out of the house during one of his nights and never went back in there. Which is kind of funny, but I also feel bad for him. Nobody wanted to stay there, and I went on Google Maps and found House E13. I'll attach the pictures. Back when I was a kid, I saw a ghost in my room. One night, back when I was a kid, I woke up to the sound of heavy breathing. So I rolled over in my bed, and the first thing I saw, a woman staring right at me, looking horrified and breathing incredibly heavily. I still remember her dark hair and blue eyes. No matter how hard I tried, she just wouldn't go away. She didn't move either. So eventually I just fell asleep. The next night she appeared again, but slightly faded this time. Once again I got scared, but I still wanted to know what was going on. So I tried to ask her what she was doing there, but all she did was just blink at me. Not normal blinking. That would have been alright. If it weren't for the fact that the whole time that I had been seeing her so far, she hadn't once blinked. Up until I asked her what she was doing there. Irritated, I decided to try and figure out if maybe it was just a random homeless woman who had broken in somehow. So I went to put my hand on her shoulder. My hand then proceeded to go straight through her and hit the wall. The fucking wall. So of course, by this point, all I could think about was how I really hoped that the ghost woman wasn't just biding her time, so she could eventually possess me. Otherwise, I was probably going to end up as the main character in the latest supernatural horror film, with my parents being interviewed about my being possessed or something, right at the very end. Eventually, I became so afraid that I just decided to roll over and try to fall back asleep again. Now, the night after that, I saw the ghost woman once again, but this time she was significantly more faded away than before. And by that point, I was so irritated about this being haunted that I just decided to ignore her. Went right back to sleep. And thankfully, I haven't even seen a glimpse of her since then. And by the way, I was only 9 years old at the time, so you could probably imagine the absolute midlife crisis that the entire situation gave me every time that I had to wake up in order to go to school. Seriously though, at the time, I had even started to contemplate whether or not to ask my parents if perhaps they could call a priest. Midlife crisis at 9. Damn. The party that never was. I've only ever had one experience happen to me, though my mother tells me that she and my uncle used to live in a haunted house when she was younger. My uncle would be taunted by eyes watching him from the darkness in his bedroom. When I was in my late teens, my grandfather lived on his own, and because he was in bad health, I stayed with him and slept on his couch. We'd walk to college in the morning or get the bus if he gave me money to get a weekly ticket, which he almost always did. One night he was away and I was alone in his place, and I was woken up by noise upstairs. It wasn't malevolent noise, but rather like a gathering of people that were having a party. It went on for about 15 minutes, and the noise got louder as more people joined the party. It became such that I was looking up at the ceiling from the couch into an empty home, listening to what seemed like 100 people loudly having some sort of a ball above me. They were laughing and joking, stamping on the ceiling and moving tables, with the muffled sounds of their talking coming down through the roof. After about 15 minutes of it, I was too creeped out to sleep, so I got up, got dressed, and walked out of there, straight to my uncle's house, 10 minutes away. He was surprised to see me at his door at the crack of dawn, but obviously welcomed me in. The problem was, my grandfather lived in a bungalow, and there was no upstairs. Living in a haunted house that wasn't always haunted. During a good portion of my teens, the house I used to live in was haunted. Not by one, but several different entities, and not all of them were nice. I wouldn't blame you for thinking that our houses in Ealing in London had a long history with people dying in the home and not wanting to move to the other side. Yet, this was not the case. As far as I know, nobody who lived in that house ever died there. Instead, the entities can be said to have been invited in. This was done by my brother, who was only a few years older. I thought it would be fun to dabble with the Ouija board, and of course this was done in private, away from the eyes of myself or my parents. During the time it was haunted, small things like keys and TV remote controls would all go missing, only to return to a place where they were not really only obvious to see, but in a place they shouldn't be. For example, TV control would disappear from the front room, only to appear upstairs in the middle of one of the beds. No way, none of us would have moved it up there. And on top of this, there'd be areas around the house where the temperature would suddenly drop. And I don't mean like the temperature in the whole room would suddenly feel colder. I mean like one small corner of the room. Weirder still, the location where the temperature was colder would remain fixed for periods at a time. So it certainly wasn't a brief one-off phenomenon. My mom seemed to have more paranormal encounters in that house than I did. After a few years of this, she called in a psychic to communicate and remove any ghosts. Apparently, there were 4 entities in the house. 3 were good-natured, but somehow remained trapped by the 4th one. This one being a nasty, aggressive man who enjoyed causing mischief. During the time the psychic was at her house, she managed to free the 3 harmless entities who purportedly went happily into the light. The fourth one, the nasty man, obviously was not happy with this. Yet after some struggle between the psychic and this final entity, it was expelled from the house. Literally, the next day the energy in that house returned to a more positive one. Not sure if this is what you mean by a ghostly encounter, but it is the truest one that I have. A friend's paranormal experience. A good friend of mine had a paranormal experience a number of years ago. He was driving back home late at night along the country lane. Like me, he lives in the UK. Anyhow, as he's driving along, he saw up ahead in his headlights what looked to be a teenage girl dressed in 1980s clothing. She was sitting by the side of the road, curled up into a ball with her head in her arms. As my friend approached, he mentioned how he got a feeling of despair and depression washing over him. Parts of him was naturally concerned as to why this girl was out in the middle of nowhere at this time of night. Yet the really weird thing was to happen as his car approached alongside her, for she seemed to just fade away, like disappearing into the surroundings. It was at this point my friend says he noticed another weird thing. Just a few feet behind her, where this ghostly girl was, there seemed to just be a black void. Whilst he admits that it was dark somehow, and really anyways, because it was dark outside, this black void was exceptionally darker, so much so that it stood out. As he saw this void, the feeling of despair and depression quickly changed to a sense of fear and despair. Like it was really dark and unpleasant, and he had the sense to get away as quickly as possible. A few moments later, and his vehicle had passed by where both this girl and the void thing were. Yet looking in his side mirror, he couldn't see either of them. Plucking up the courage a few hundred feet down the road, he turned the vehicle around and headed back, only to find neither the girl nor the void were there. He swears that at the time this happened, he was wide awake and never felt so concerned by the whole experience. Have any of you ever come across a haunting which has this black void, like formless blob shape he described? I'd love to hear your response if so. I saw my first ghost when I was just 11 years old. Since I was born, I've lived in a house where strange things happen. It's a house over 100 years old, one that was hit by a bomb during the Spanish Civil War, and where people have been born and have died, all from my family. I'm somebody who strongly believes in the paranormal, also because I've experienced it since I was little, from clocks that start ticking on their own at night without being wound, all the way to footsteps and noises and children's laughter and even visual encounters like the one I'm about to share. When I was around 11, I used to sleep with my little brother in a very small bedroom. It had a trundle bed. It was near my parents' room. After our bedroom, there's a long and rather narrow hallway that leads to the kitchen, interrupted only by what is now my bedroom. As a child, I was terrified of that room and the hallway in general, partly because the kitchen door is a swinging door with a glass pane that reflects light and shadows in the hallway when the air current's moving. One night, my brother couldn't sleep because he suffers from insomnia, so he called my dad to come sleep with us. My dad lay down on the lower bed with him, while I slept alone on the top one. And in the middle of the night, I started to clearly hear footsteps coming down the hallway from the kitchen. I stayed very still listening because I didn't recognize those footsteps as anyone from the family. But I didn't get scared either, thinking it was probably my brother coming back from getting water in the kitchen. And just as I was about to turn over, I saw a woman with black curly hair wearing a white nightgown walk by. She was much taller than my mother. But since she headed toward her bedroom, I didn't feel anything bad or scary. I assumed I had misjudged her height because of the darkness. The next morning, nobody mentioned anything until lunchtime, when my mother asked why my father had slept with us. We explained that, as usual, my brother couldn't sleep, and that's when she said, "And if Dad was already with you, why did he come to my room?" I froze and told her what I had seen, and both my brother and my father said they had seen exactly the same thing. They thought it was my mother. She replied she hadn't seen anything, just heard somebody open her door to check if she was awake. And then they didn't close it again, so she assumed it was my brother. The good part is that no one of us felt afraid, not like the other times. The man with the top hat. It's not something that usually scares me, since I'm more than used to it. However, sometimes I remember certain stories that have happened to me or to relatives. I even find it hard to go to the bathroom alone. One night we're having dinner on the terrace. I live in a penthouse. My cousin and her husband, Ivan, were there, and he was very playful and loved scary stories. Sometimes he would set the wall clock in our hallway to scare us. Ivan had cancer, and he would later die from it. And at the time, we believed he was cured after an operation, and apparently was not receiving it, nor had he received any medication. The thing is we were talking about 1,000 things, and suddenly he looked toward the hallway and turned pale. His face changed completely. I'd never seen him react like that. I asked him what was wrong, almost hysterical, thinking he had seen a wasp. I'm terrified of them, and in summer there's quite a few in my terrace. Although at night they usually go away. He answered that he had seen a man with a top hat and a suit cross from my brother's room to the bathroom. We made him swear more than 10 times that it wasn't another one of his jokes. He described the man in detail. My father also turned pale when he recognized him as his grandfather, the original owner of the house. Ivan swore until the day he died that he hadn't lied to us. Shortly before he died, when his cancer was already very advanced and he was receiving palliative care, he said that while resting in the guest room at my aunt's house, a woman dressed in black with dark hair and a kind face and very large gold earrings sat in the bed and tried to talk to him. But since he was already very sick, he told her he couldn't speak to her because he was too weak, too exhausted. She replied that she knew, and that was why she was there, and told him to ask for anything he wanted. Ivan was stunned and replied that he didn't know, and asked if he could think about it. She said yeah, and that she would come back the next day, but she never returned. He told me that day that he knew he didn't have much time left, as those beings were starting to come to comfort him. My cousin says it was a hallucination caused by the morphine, but I don't know what to believe. Has anybody else had a story like this? The man of the house. Real experience. Now that he's gone, I can say I never thought I would miss living in a haunted house. To be perfectly cliche, it all began one assuming October evening. I was carving pumpkins with my mother and had set the top of mine back on the counter with mindful precision to prevent it from rolling into the floor. I set off to the sink to rinse my hands, and as soon as I did, I heard like a loud thud from behind me. The pumpkin top was no longer where I'd left it. It was now sitting smugly on the floor in front of the refrigerator. According to my mother's report, the second I turned my back to it, the top of the pumpkin skidded across the counter on its own and slammed forcefully against the refrigerator door. That's the night we met Clark. Clark was a private sort of spirit. My mother and I never felt threatened by him. but he didn't care much for us making his presence known. We talked about recent episodes with friends and family, but mostly excitedly relaying them between ourselves. And after years of learning to live with him and his quirks, I headed to the library one afternoon to find a slice of solace. By pure serendipity, I met a friend of a friend amongst the stacks who invited me to her first meeting of her local paranormal investigation team. All I had to do was accept and just pop on into study room number 2 in a few minutes. Excitedly, I began to tell her when I'd actually lived down the road with an active spirit. His name is, just a second, I need to step out. I blanked. Distressed by the sudden amnesia, my face began to heat to boiling as I threw on my coat, pushed in the chair, and rushed past the help desk, down the stairs and out the front door. All the while, I tried over and over to remember his name. And as the cool winter air hit my face, my memory returned in an instant. Clark, his name is Clark. I didn't go to the meeting, and I never called the acquaintance. I didn't feel stifled by Clark's possessiveness, but rather protected. One day, I had to be driven to work because despite turning the house upside down, my keys could not be found anywhere. Eventually, they were located in the further corner of the hall closet on the floor. Perhaps Clark knew something that we didn't and was keeping me safe from an untimely fate. Once, when I was reading a book of ghost stories, right next to my head I heard what sounded like fingernails dancing along the wall almost playfully. I wasn't scared, I just smiled to myself and continued reading. Everything was fine, until the altar incident. I was practicing witch, or I was a practicing witch at the time, and had a spread of small candles laid out as part of an ongoing ritual. I came home one day to find one of them not only out of place, but teetering on the very edge of the table I kept them on. Around the same time, I came home to find a Hello Kitty doll lying in the middle of my altar, like some perverse sacrifice or glaring mockery of my practice. These incidents made me feel uneasy, and they felt invasive and bordering on malicious. Clark no longer felt like a friend, if it even was Clark. Enter Diane. I had started exchanging emails with the local medium. Given that these events were occurring in rural Maine town in mid-2010s, she may have been the only one. Diane agreed to come visit her apartment to tell us what she had sensed, and whether it warranted a return visit for a proper investigation with the bells and whistles. She described a hunched-over elderly woman with a tight knot of hair on the top of her head. My mother and I exchanged a look, and Diane, of course, was describing Bees, the former landowner. They had lived on the ground floor apartment and who had passed away a few years ago. We were taken aback by this assessment because we were so confident it was always her husband Clark that we were contending with. Diane continued to make her way through the house as we exchanged stories for insight. Nothing really stands out from the visit as I look back, except one occurrence after Diane's departure. The toilet seat was up and neither of us had used the bathroom since Diane had arrived. It was just the two of us in the house. To us, the message was clear. I'm not Bess. So our spirit was a man. What made us so certain it was Clark in particular? A very easy question to answer. Shortly before the inaugural incident in October, the attic space in the adjacent apartment began intensive renovations. The attic space belonged to the ground floor apartment where Bess had lived. Oh, I thought they called her Bees. Bess makes more sense. It's where she used to live with Clark, and the attic space is also where Clark killed himself. And I've always been rather skeptical of anything that can't be proven, so the theory that ghosts will act out when the physical space they spent their last moments in is disturbed was nothing more than just that to me. A theory. In this case, it makes sense. A man of staunch Catholic faith when he was living. It's understandable that he would do things like smack pumpkin tops off tables and place toys into pagan altars. Once we even watched as a stack of books toppled themselves off the coffee table. Amongst those that went flying was one about ghosts, one about aliens, but the one that remained perfectly placed was one called Conversations with God. Clark's shenanigans continued to brighten the monotony of basically every day living, as having him around became pretty normal as a dirty dish in a sink, or a floor that needed sweeping. The only thing that changed after Diane's visit was me telling him firmly and often that he was not to mess with my things. And to my relief, he stopped. Eventually we moved, but whenever I drive by that old converted farmhouse on New Bridgeton Road, I wonder whether the current residents enjoy their Halloween season. Creepy things going on. As far as I know, nobody's died in our house. We moved in about 3.5 years ago. And the first night we were there, my husband said he kept hearing kids talking and laughing. I didn't hear anything, and he never heard it again. Everything was quiet for the most part. I sometimes would see things out of the corner of my eye or hear things, but nothing too weird that you can't write off as being tired or whatever. Things get misplaced a lot and show up in strange places or have just disappeared altogether. Lately, my 6-year-old has been having bad dreams and talking about a bunch of kids and a scary lady. I've let him sleep in our room for the last few nights because he was so scared, and many times during the night he'd jump up and say, "I can see the people again, they're all around us." I'm not sure what to make of it all this. Like, he's wide awake and remembers it, so I don't think it's night terrors. Another thing I've noticed is some of our electric toys all of a sudden turn on. Not really sure I believe we have a ghost, and I'm more worried that my son has something wrong with his brain. I guess it could be a ghost, and we have my father-in-law's ashes in the house, but he's not the type to go scaring people. Has anyone experienced something like this before? Update. Also, my son said there was a bubble over him and he couldn't get out. He said he saw a scary lady with her body standing there and her head next to her floating in the air. Her face kept changing. She had some kind of light on her head that was moving back and forth. I think my grandma is visiting tonight. So like about half a year ago, November of 2024, my grandma had passed away, and it was a terrible time. She didn't have anywhere to go, and she even slept with me, for crying out loud. So this information has really gotten to me. Everyone I've heard talk about her was, well, apparently visited by her via a dream at night. And like I legit mean everybody except for me. Not even like a weird dream, like background character, nothing, I just never ever saw her. However, today as I was watching a YouTube video on my phone, when out of nowhere I heard my name called out from somewhere in her voice, I thought, hey, it's probably my brain playing tricks on me. So I reversed the video 10 seconds back to listen to the sounds very carefully if I could hear anything that would sound similar to that, and I heard absolutely nothing. After that, I brushed it off as me hearing things, and decided to finish watching the video and have a drink in the kitchen, go to sleep. However, when I went to the kitchen, I saw a weird light coming from the living room. When I went to check it out, it was an electronic candle that turned on next to a picture of Grandma. And I swear to God, like 2 hours ago, when I went into that bathroom, that candle was not on. But again, I could just be imagining stuff. I just walked out, drank my water, and now I'm sitting in my room with LED lights on very brightly because I'm actually kind of scared of this. As much as I smiled seeing the candle on, this stuff still scares me. So that's not me really getting any sleep tonight. But this might still be debunked, because I'll ask my mom if she turned the candle on before going to sleep, and I just didn't notice at first. But this feels too weirdly convenient. So yeah, anyway, that's my story. Thanks for listening. See ya.
Welcome to the Paranormal M community, where the extraordinary becomes reality. If you're fascinated by all things supernatural, subscribing and enabling notifications is a must. Join us on this thrilling ride into the unknown. Guatemalan worry dolls, and other weird happenings. My wife, a long time ago, used to have night terrors. Some of it may have been due to the fact that she grew up in a legit haunted house. I can testify that shit went on in that house. Anyhow, her father also owned a turn-of-the-century piano, made in like 1910. This will be relevant in a moment, and her mother has all kinds of antique stuff from when her family came to New Mexico in the 1800s. Needless to say, things could have been happening in her house because of all that stuff, or the fact that the previous owner decided to not live anymore and killed himself in the basement with exhaust. Well, as time went by, her night terrors continued and got bad. Her mom decided to use the Guatemalan worry dolls to try to help, I guess. The premise of Guatemalan worry dolls is to put them underneath your pillow and sleep. Afterwards, you place them in a box and bury them on a path you will never go on again. It worked. However, fast forward to right before my daughter's born, my wife and I rented a beautiful house on a hill overlooking the town. After 6 months into living in the house while cleaning, these Guatemalan worry dolls start showing up in random places. Thresholds of the house, odd nooks and crannies, stuff like that. We weren't entirely sure where they were in fact coming from. Well, my daughter was born, and we remained in the house for another 6 months or so. But as we were moving and cleaning out the house, more dolls kept showing up. Well, we packed them away, and my wife forgot where she put them. As we were moving into a new house, not 2 or 3 days in the threshold of the front of the house, Guatemalan worry doll was lying right there. We'd get rid of old couches and bring new couches in, and sure enough, lift the couch cushions, and voila, worry doll. For a long time, I believed the piano held something in it, because when we brought it with us to the house, shit would always happen. Never in front of me, but definitely behind me, but always in front of my wife and her friends. Lights inadvertently turning on, picture frames swinging on the walls and falling to the ground. Some really funky shit. I started accepting what was happening when it was in my child's room. That pissed me off. I'd come home when no one else was here and sternly tell whatever it was that it wasn't welcome. Reciting the Lord's Prayer in step, we eventually moved the piano out and a lot of things stopped. However, we were telling one of my wife's friends, who's very sensitive to this kind of stuff, that she was really creeped out. But about 3 days after, she was cleaning out her car and called my wife frantically saying, "This is fucked up, you're messing with me." And my wife was confused as shit. You guessed it, worry doll in her center console. Most recently, my wife found one. The scariest thing to happen was the time my wife and I were stoned watching a Netflix comedy special for John Mulaney. A caption came on telling my wife when she was going to die. I thought it was a caption saying when John Mulaney was born, so I didn't even look at what it said, but later on my wife told me what it said. The Blue Boy. I was fairly young, probably about 12 years old. Me and my family were up in Scotland visiting, and on the way back we stopped off in a place called Alnwick, in Northumberland to visit the infamous Chillingham Castle. My uncle, who lived in Burnwick upon Tweed, was very much a skeptic of the stories of the castle and claimed he slept there overnight. We got to the doors and my parents paid for the tickets for the tour. On the way in, there were signs saying no flash photography, which I noticed. The tour was amazing, so much history and especially the dungeons, where they had on display all the instruments of torture that were used in the castle dating all the way back to the 1200s. At one point in the tour, we were walking past one room called the Pink Room, which was roped off, where I saw a blue flash of light inside. I looked at my mother and said to her that I thought people had to go into the room and were taking photos, and that it was naughty as it wasn't allowed. My mother agreed and we continued the tour. On our way out of the castle, my little sister begged for a book of the castle and its history. My parents gave in and brought her the book. On the way back home, my sister mentioned that there was a section in the book listing all the known ghosts of the castle, one of which being known as the Blue Boy, which is commonly seen as a blue flash or a halo. The owners of the house believe that the Blue Boy is linked to a child's skeleton, which was found hidden behind a wall in one of the rooms in the house during renovation. The very same room I saw the flash. My mother looked at me and said, "I think that's what you saw, son." On the night shift. So I used to work as a security officer. I was asked to work on a Saturday night shift at an old warehouse in Dudley. I turned up at 5 p.m. where the building was a huge brick warehouse with some makeshift offices at the front. I walked in, took the keys from the day officer, and locked the doors behind him. Everything seemed normal for a while. It was a bit creepy as the building was so old, but I was used to that. Around 1 a.m. I got a call from the warehouse manager. One of his night drivers had forgotten his paperwork and asked me to go into the office, right at the back of the warehouse, and collect it for him so that way he could pick it up. I said fine and headed to the office. The warehouse was pitch black. I had a small torch, but only slightly lighting my way. I walked through until I got to the office door, which was a huge metal sliding door. It made a screeching noise as I pulled it open. As I walked in front of me was the office's fax machine, which was blinking and the paperwork was printing out. I grabbed the paperwork, but as I turned around, I looked to the other end of the office and saw what I can only describe as a dark figure hunched over, shivering. I could hear what sounded like breathing, but like if you were freezing cold. I stood there for about 30 seconds motionless, staring at this figure. I turned back slowly and closed the door behind me, rushing back to the front office where I locked the door and waited for the driver. An hour later, the driver collected his paperwork, and for the rest of the night, I'd convinced myself it was just the dark playing tricks on me. But didn't stop me from unlocking the office door or checking the cameras every few seconds. 5 a.m. turned up, and I got a knock on the door from the day officer. I handed him the keys, expecting him to come in, but he locked the door from the outside. I asked him if he was going in. He said he doesn't go inside when there's nobody else in, but sits in his car in the car park and waits. I said, "That's a bit strange." He looked at me and asked if I went anywhere else other than the security office. I told him that I went to the back office to get paperwork for a driver, not telling him about the other part. I never forget the look he gave me or what he said then. He looked me in the eyes and said, "Well, you know why I don't go in there alone then." It gave me the chills, but I shrugged it off and just said, "Okay then," and left for home. Safe to say on the way home I called my office and requested not to go back there. I was being watched by something unearthly. Before I start, I'd like to give you context on the layout of the apartment where I used to live. It was a 3-floor apartment building in which me and my family lived on the 2nd floor. Now, once you get into the apartment, there is a little walkway. You go through the front door, and to the right, there's a closet, which couldn't have been any more than 3 feet away from the entrance. You look to your left, and it was a little walkway that couldn't have been any more than 4 feet. You pass the threshold, and immediately you're within the middle of the living room and the dining room. This will all be important later in the story. Now, this was back in early summer of '96 on a Saturday night. I was 15 at the time, and I was in the living room with my aunt, who was sleeping on the couch while I was laying down watching TV. It was 12:38 a.m. I remember the time because I was flicking through channels. The time was displayed on the top right of the screen. It was dark with only light emanating from the TV. I just so happened to be finding something interesting to watch when I suddenly felt a sense of dread. I tried to shake it off, but it stayed in the pit of my stomach. Minutes after, something told me to look in the direction of the small walkway where the entrance of the apartment is. It was almost as if something forced me to look that way. You know how if you were in class and you were just sitting there minding your own business and you feel like eyes are on you? Then you so happen to turn in direction to the person staring at you? Sort of like that. Once I looked, I immediately noticed that there was a tall, dark figure over 6 feet staring at me from the shadows. The man was blacker than the shadows that he stood within. I mean, like jet black. I did a double take and then squinted under the expression that maybe I was seeing things, but he was standing there watching me. It was like once he's seen me, he was dissatisfied, or perhaps satisfied. It's hard to see his expression, but he slowly turned around and walked past the entrance to the apartment, going straight through the closet. I was utterly shocked as well as terrified when I noticed it. My 15-year-old brain couldn't wrap around what I just witnessed. I sat there, still staring in that direction and trying to process the whole ordeal. I snapped out of it quickly, going to the closet to see if anyone was there, but to my horror, there wasn't. The front door never opened, nor did the closet door, which baffled me in utter disbelief. I went and tried to wake up my aunt to tell her about the situation that just occurred. My aunt, groggy from being awakened from her deep sleep, said, "T, you watched too many scary movies. It wasn't real, now go back to sleep." But I assure you that it was absolutely real. The scariest thing of it all is that it almost felt like time stopped, like an outer-body experience. I felt like I was stuck in limbo somewhere. It was like being present in between 2 different realities at the same time. I've had other strange things happen to me, but this one was by far the scariest encounter I've ever had. Mother's Day this year, ghost experience. I went home to Indiana for my 4-day weekend off at work. I visited my mom Friday night and Saturday. Sunday, I stayed at my dad's to visit my stepmom. They live in a state park because my stepmom is the property manager. I slept on a twin bed on the floor, and my daughter slept on a cushion bed on the floor next to me on my right side. She's 2 years old. I woke up in the middle of the night because I heard what I thought was my daughter whining and getting up. I looked over, and it was standing like it was where she already was. Where she was already, and walking to go into another room. I said, quote-unquote, my daughter's nickname. Once I said that, I realized it wasn't her, because she wasn't wearing a gown and it was kind of transparent. It was a white, transparent color. It turned and looked at me. It stared at me long enough that I was thinking, what the heck should I grab? Maybe my phone for a flashlight? So I did. By the time I did that, it vanished. My phone said 3:05. I know I saw what I saw because I wasn't in sleep paralysis, and once I'm awake, I don't see things like this. I wake up at crazy hours for work sometimes. I know what I seen was there. I checked on my daughter because I was worried about her. She was whining in her sleep a bit, but maybe about 2 minutes after my daughter woke up, we went to the kitchen and got her some more milk in her sippy cup. I left the kitchen light on because I wanted a nightlight after this. Prayed for my daughter and then went to sleep 40 minutes after this incident. The next morning, I told my family what I had seen, and they said they had a few experiences there too, but never seen anything. I felt like this little girl didn't mean to show herself to me, thinking I was asleep. Man in my bed. For reference, I could always see or feel ghosts for as long as I can remember. My mother says I was born with a gift, though it sure doesn't feel like one. I was quite young at the time, but sometime when I was in middle school, my mother, dad, and my older sister were at work at the time, as it was pretty early in the morning. We lived in a basement there, which had one room with 2 beds next to each other. Our living room, or rather our living, would be right there as soon as we opened the door. Since it was summer, I had no school, and therefore I was home alone, which wasn't new. I have back problems, so every few hours I had to wake myself up to switch sides on which I was sleeping on. I think it's important to note that there were no windows in the bedroom, so there couldn't be a reflection of anything from outside. The morning went like normal. As I woke, I turned around, and when I opened my eyes to check what time it was before moving, there was a shadow man laying horizontally in the middle of where the 2 beds were connected. At first I thought it was just my eyes playing a trick on me, as I just woke up. So I stayed in the same position, blinking my eyes, trying and thinking maybe that might help. It's safe to say that it didn't help. I stared at it long enough to catch some features. He had a hat on like a cowboy hat and some really pointy shoes. It was like something out of the 1920s. It wasn't exactly a shadow, as I could see all of this. It was like a different shade of black compared to the rest of the room. I don't know how long I stayed there, but he disappeared as soon as I moved my feet. I told my sister when she came home, as it scared the hell out of me. Later, we Googled the house address and found out that there was a fire that burned down whatever house was there before. It didn't say in the article if anybody died in the fire, and we couldn't find anything else on it. But I will say this, the fire happened somewhere between 1920 through 1940. Can't remember the exact date, but with the clothes that he was wearing, it kind of just makes sense. This was the first time I physically saw him, but I've heard his voice multiple times after this. I no longer live in that house, but I just couldn't shake that memory. We saw the same thing, but we didn't know it at first. One night, me and my boyfriend were in bed, and he was already sleeping, and I was watching on my phone. After an hour of watching, he moved and said, "Stop touching my feet, I'm trying to sleep." And I was confused because I wasn't even moving. I just thought that maybe it was our dog. I shrugged it off and continued watching. Fast forward to 2 or more episodes or so in, I decided to sleep. I was sleeping on my side, around 2 to 3 a.m., and I suddenly woke up. Something was telling me to lift my head up and look out the corner of the room. As I did, I saw a large shadow, but I wasn't scared. It was super tall, and I stared at it for a good minute thinking I was just dreaming, because I just woke up and my thought hasn't really processed yet. I was thinking to myself that why that part of the room was so dark. I have my Wi-Fi router there and it's supposed to be lit up, but it was super dark. And I can make out this tall shadow and its head. I decided to sleep it off and worry about it the next day. My boyfriend woke me up because he was pissed at me because apparently I was moving all around all night and he hadn't had much sleep. I went to pee, and when I came back I told him, "Hey, I had a really weird dream." He looks at me all confused and I told him, "Last night I think I woke up and I saw a shadow here," while pointing at where I saw it. "I saw it too," he said. "I saw it when I woke up, and I told you to stop moving. I was going to tell you, but I don't want you to get scared, so I just ignored it." I asked him what he saw, and he told me I got goosebumps running all over my body. He said it was very tall, but I can't see his body or face. It's like a shadow, and it felt like a man. After that, I told my mom, who was very superstitious, and had my room blessed. I'm not exactly sure what to do with this, but I'm a bit worried. So I live in a 2-story house that was built, I think in 1950 or 1970, somewhere in there. I'm honestly not sure. As far as I know, nobody's passed away in or near this house. I don't think it was built on a gravesite or anything like that. There's definitely been at least 3 different energies or spirits that I've encountered. One was a little boy who would get mad at me if I said a bad word. Well, more disappointed or annoyed than mad. The second was a woman, which I'm not really sure what was up with her. She was just kind of there and was super intense and wanted to get my attention. The third was someone or moreover something. It wasn't bad, but it would observe me, and it would stand at the end of my bed and watch me, so a bit creepy. I haven't talked to or interacted with anything because, 1, I don't want to unlock or bring something to the surface that shouldn't be messed with, and 2, I didn't want to mess with anything that could be demonic or dangerous. So, I was recently watching a few videos of people going to haunted hotels and houses. I was pretty interested in what they did to communicate with the spirits, so I was binge watching a ghost hunting YouTube channel. I accidentally clicked on a YouTube short while scrolling of an edit of Sam and Colby. In the edit, the name was not said, but written. It was the name of something demonic, and it started with a B, and it meant something about a demonic spirit or entity that was very powerful. I let out the smallest laugh and said out loud, "I'm so sorry, but..." insert name there, probably Beelzebub. Then I let out a quieter laugh. The second I said the name, a card started moving, a pop-up card that was open. It started to close and open over and over again, and I of course said, "I'm sorry, bye," and then left my bedroom. The way my bedroom's set up is that I'd have to pass by the card to be able to get out of the room. It made me feel even more uneasy, knowing that the AC was not turned on and there was absolutely no airflow in that area. It felt hot and heavy and uncomfy, almost a little choky. So I quickly passed it and left, closing my door. I told my friend about it and they said, "That's weird." I stayed out of my room for a while and went downstairs, but when I came back up I thought, maybe I should go back in. So I went back in, and it had stopped because when I went back over towards the card, it didn't feel as if it did before. It was actually cooler, not heavy, and I didn't feel uncomfy passing by it. I just think it's strange that reaction happened when I sort of mocked the name of a powerful demonic entity. I also want to say, the sound of someone walking up to the door and opening it and nobody being there has happened a lot. Recently, especially at night. And a lot of thumping on my windows also happened. So I don't know what to do. I've never really felt that type of energy in my house before. The area around the card, while it was moving, was weird and gross. I think that's the best way to describe it. Also, I wanted to say the name again. However, I thought maybe don't do that, especially in case it's like a Beetlejuice type thing. I saw a ball of light. This has been many years ago. I was 13. It was at night. I was watching TV with my mom and she fell asleep, so I went to go to the computer as the movie ended. I was 100% awake and fully conscious, not tired. I've always been a night person since I was a little kid. As I entered the room with the computer there was a ball of light floating in the air. It was a little below my eye level, and it was slowly moving straight from one wall to the other side of the room. I don't remember how it disappeared, if it went through the wall to the other side or just vanished. I was somehow mesmerized, and I was just calmly standing there and watching. I felt calm and peace. When it disappeared, I just normally continued to go to the computer. Just after 15 or 20 minutes, I realized I saw something weird, so I became afraid. I woke up my mom and went back to sleep. It's interesting that I wasn't afraid at that moment, but after I realized it was something weird. There was a camera right in front of me, but I was somehow mesmerized and I just didn't think to take a picture. It was a very light blue, almost white, but it didn't look electrical at all. It was made of milky ethereal light. It was a small ball that was inside and maybe more dense. Well, the inside part was more dense, but then a big ball around it. Just like one thing that you can see through a layer outside. The inside ball and the outside layer were connected by two streams, and the light was slowly moving between them. It was all about the size of a human head, and inside the ball was about the size of a light bulb. I was really 100% awake. Haven't seen anything like it in TV, and I'm 100% sure I literally saw it physically with my own eyes. Never seen anything like that before nor after. I don't have hallucinations, and I was 13, so obviously I didn't use any substances. Bad memory or something more? So to start this off, I always chalked this up to maybe being a really bad dream, until I asked my older brother about it, and he remembered this incident too. I was probably 4 or 5 at this time, him being a year older. But anyway, we were play fighting in the room that we shared at the time. While I was running away, I ran to jump on the bed, but just before I hopped onto the bed, I felt someone grab my feet and pull me underneath. So from here, the story gets blurry, because what I experienced versus what he saw were two different things. He seen me get pulled underneath the bed, where he pulled me back out. He said I looked unnatural in the way that I fell in. What I remember was not right. I found myself in a dark room, almost medieval looking, but everything was huge, like a room for giants or something. There were 2 weird-looking people speaking a language I still haven't heard to this day. When I noticed that the room I woke up in was my regular room, on my bed with my brother asleep. From that day on, I would wake up and get pulled under by my feet. It happened so much that I resorted to jumping off the bed for almost a year. Finally stopped altogether and never happened since. I don't know what to make of it. Bad memory or just a nightmare? Stopped after that, but my memory is maybe messing with me. Or was it something more? The little girl. I spent most of my childhood in a small town in Pennsylvania, a childhood home that's been long since feeling like a fever dream to me. For as long as I can remember, my family will tell me stories about how a little girl would frequent the halls of my grandfather's home. He would see her peeking around the corner every now and then and hear her footsteps, and hear her giggling from time to time. He was even seen with floating objects from time to time as well. I'd spend most of my summers at his place and would go back home after some time there. One night I woke up, sleeping at the foot of my parents' bed, and I saw a little girl dancing in front of me. spinning in circles with a dress and I couldn't see the color of because it was see-through. I hopped on my parents' bed and hugged my dad while I cried myself silently back to sleep. One night I woke up in my room and I was sleeping on the top bunk, and for some reason I was searching for my sister. I hopped down and looked under the bunk and didn't see anybody there. Mind you, everybody in the house is fast asleep. I look down the stairs and there's only one light on down there, which leads to our dining room. I then see a little girl walk from right to left, past the bottom of the stairs into the dining room. I thought, I found my sister. Let me see what she's doing. I walked down the stairs and into the dining room and there was nobody there. The kitchen was dark, the laundry room was empty, and the back door was locked. I then went back up the stairs and seen my sister was fast asleep in the bottom bunk the whole time. There's no way she would have walked past me without me knowing. That house was always strange to me because I'd see her from time to time, along with a very tall man who would walk her hallways also. My older sister will also talk about how she'd see the little girl on different occasions, hear her giggles, and see her footprints in the carpet throughout the house. Anyways, my grandfather passed not too long ago. My uncle says that the little girl has been moving through his house. He lived with my grandpa, as if she's looking for something, hearing noises and movements way more frequently than normal. My grandfather passed away in the hospital, and I believe that she's upset that she hasn't seen him again, or that he may never even come home. She's never given us the energy that she's an evil spirit. Maybe she's just a lost soul that enjoys our company. I had a dream about my grandpa. He was with family that passed away a long, long time ago, so I know he crossed over. Rest in peace, Grandpa. I love you. Rock House. I'm a 28-year-old female. The story I'm about to tell you happened back in 2016 with my best friend Chris. Now, ever since the day that Chris and I met, we've always got ourselves in the dumbest things ever. I mean, Chris ran away once and he had my nerves all messed up. But he came back because he had no money. We weren't the smartest teens, but we still enjoyed life. So one summer night, Chris and I were hanging out and we were trying to think of a place to explore, like we always did. And at the time, I told him I've never been to the old Rock House in Greenwood, South Carolina. Now, before I get started, let me give you a little history on the Rock House. A man named Tom Payne Tolbert, built a fireproof house in 1926. The fireproof house was constructed entirely from stone, concrete, glass, and steel. After years of family homes burning down, Tolbert lived in a detached kitchen and used the large house to store family heirlooms. Tolbert lived his later years in isolation. The now crumbling fortress is accessible only by foot, and no one's ever lived inside its walls. You can look up way more about its history online if you like. Now back to the story. I've always been told that the Rock House had many spirits in it and around it. Like I said at the time, I've never been to it. So with that said, Chris and I took my cousin's car and headed out to the old Rock House. I've heard of people going in the daytime, but never really heard of people say that they went at night. We, being dumb, went at night because why not? Ghosts and spirits never bothered me much, so I thought, why not at night? Once we pulled up to the woods and parked on the side of the road, I get the bad feeling run all over my body. I sit there for a moment. I believe Chris sees this look on my face and asks if I still want to do it. Something is telling me not to get out, but at the same time, I want to see this place even at night. Yeah, let's go see how scary this place is, I told him. Hell yeah, let's do it, he replied. We get out and start walking through the woods. And as we're walking, we have our phones out for light, and we're making jokes, acting silly like we always do. We can never take anything seriously, no matter what. As we're walking, we don't realize how quiet it is to be in the woods at night, in the middle of summer. We find our way to the front of the house. Chris is in front of me, and we're looking at the house. No front door, no windows. All you can see is pure darkness. For some reason, I just can't move even though Chris is walking to what used to be the door. At this moment, I realize that we're in complete darkness and there are no sounds. No animals, no bugs, no wind or anything, just pure silence. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I see something in the top left window. But before I can completely look, I hear something to the left of me and I look over, but I see nothing. Only the darkness. A feeling of dread falls over me, but nothing's there. Chris is now at the door of the house and looks inside. I look at the windows and there it is. Something is there in the window looking down at me. My body turns cold. Those eyes, I'll never forget those eyes burning a hole in my soul. Bright yellow reddish eyes, like fire. All of a sudden I hear Chris say, "Oh, hell no." He turns to run to me, but my body's still frozen. He grabs my wrist and pulls me to run and never lets me go. As we're running, we're jumping over fallen trees and everything on the ground that people left over time. And as we run, I realize something is running beside us, and I don't dare to look back. My body is now in autopilot mode as Chris has the grip still on my wrist pulling me. My mind's blank and my heart is racing, and at one point I feel like I can feel breath of whatever it is that's chasing us. The moment we make it to the car, everything comes back to me and I'm back in control of my mind and body. We jump in the car and Chris goes to start the car that he has, and he has his face covered by the steering wheel as he tries to start the car, but it's dead. The car is dead. We start freaking out with my head buried between my legs and Chris still hiding his face, and I yell out, "This is it, Chris. This is it. This is how we die. This is how us white people die in movies because we do dumb shit like this." Chris yells back at me, "Shut up, we're not gonna die. The car will start." I can still feel this thing outside of the car. It's just there. Is this why there are so many spirits here? Does it take the souls of people who have been caught to come here? I feel it looking at us. Something wants me to look at it, but at the same time, a voice in my head is telling me no. And I don't want to cry, but I gotta cry. The car starts and Chris tries to speed off. We start going down the road, but then one of the tires blows. We're now on the side of the road again. We just sit there, not wanting to get out. It's quiet again. The feeling of being watched is still there. Luckily for us, a guy in a truck pulls up behind us. I feel safe right now. The guy pulls over and helps Chris change the tire. I hold my phone as a light with my back to the woods. I still have that feeling. I want to turn and see what's there, but I dare not to. Something's telling me not to look. After the tire gets fixed, we head to the Huddle House I guess it's close by, and I need to calm down. The poor lady working that night sees something's wrong with us, and with what little money that we had, the lady helps us pay for a meal. The next few days, strange things start happening around my house. For example, I'm in the kitchen fixing something for lunch. My roommate and I are talking like normal, and the cutting board goes flying across the kitchen. She gives me this look like, "See what you just caused? Shit keeps happening for no reason, all because you want to visit haunted places." I pick up the cutting board, and at this point I feel like I need to make things right. I've always been told that if you disturb the dead, that you have to make things right. So with that being said, that weekend I go see some friends who don't live that far from the rock house, and I tell them that I need to go there. So we do. This time it's fully daylight. Once we get there, I still have the feeling, but I don't say a word. Once we get to the house, my friends go in and look around. They explore the place, inside and out. I look to the left of me and see nothing, but the feeling's still there. My body's weak. As I walk and I look in the direction that Chris saw something at. Then I look into the room to the left of me and I see that the room is full of designs and paint all over the room. The whole house is covered the same way. But there's something about this one room. I walk into the room and there's a pentagram with all the markings around it. I walk over to it and examine it closely. I walk around seeing if it's done right, and to my eyes, I see that it is. I yell out to my friends, "Hey, I think somebody tried to summon a demon or something." As soon as the words leave my mouth, something comes crashing down. I nope the hell out of there, and I just start running out of the house, sadly leaving my friends inside, not meaning to. All I do is run through the woods yelling, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." I don't stop until I'm out. My friends come after me wondering what's going on, and I tell them about the other night and what happened as well. At this point, I just want to leave. We all get into the car. Then my friend who was driving goes to start the car, but once again it's dead. Just like the other night, but in a different car. My mind goes back to the other night with this big, dark creature coming to mind for some reason. I'd never seen it before. Was it the thing chasing us that night? Was it putting itself inside of my mind to scare me more? So many questions. I try my best not to freak out. I called my roommate to come pick us up. As we're waiting, a car pulls up. He must live on this road and knows what happens. He says every time somebody goes to that house, their car's dead when they get back. He helps jumpstart the car and we go down the road. I see my roommate and I just jump out of the car and jump into mine. I speed off as fast as I can, wanting to get as far away from that place as physically possible. My friends meet me at my house and I made a promise to myself to never go back to the rock house. For some reason, Chris and I stopped hanging out. We didn't get into a fight or anything, we just stopped being friends and we never spoke about what happened that night until a few weeks. We both seemed to have forgotten that night. I called him and asked him what it was that he saw inside that house to make him do what he did. He doesn't remember what he saw, but he remembers the night. I thought I wouldn't forget, but I did until a few weeks ago. Someone told me that a brain will block out something so traumatizing that you won't remember that it even happened so you can live your life like normal. Maybe that's what our brains did for us, so we won't live in fear forever. Now it's 2023, now that I remember that this story is recent to a few friends of mine at work, and a person told me that they want to go visit the rock house. I told them no they don't, but they really want to, not believing in ghosts, and they've never really experienced anything ghostly. So I said, go if you want, but I promise you I won't be going back to that place ever again, and once you do, you won't go back there either. The witch that used to live behind me didn't scare me as much as whatever was in the woods that night. Yes, a witch used to live on the property behind my house. I think I accidentally opened a portal in my home. So let's go back to when I first moved into my house just over a year ago. There was nothing in this house. I know that for a fact. My nan was a medium. She checked the house and it was all clear. And I also have some empathetic abilities. So I can usually feel when there's something going on, and I got nothing from this house. After my nan passed away, a few ago, I noticed more and more happenings in the house, but it didn't feel like it could have been my nan visiting. It started off with little things here and then, a couple little taps throughout the house, but over the past couple months it's been more active, and there's a very dark energy lingering in my spare bedroom. Once again, it didn't start off very strong, but it's been getting stronger and stronger over the past few weeks. More activity, setting off motion detectors, and just like the feeling when you go into a spare room is horrible. There's something bad in there and it's getting stronger. I've been racking my brain trying to think of what I brought into the house that I might have attracted it and maybe brought it in. I've done multiple cleansing rituals, but it hasn't gone away. It seems to just be pissed off that I'm trying to get rid of it. Even going so far as to hide my sage stick, so I had to buy a new one yesterday. I was talking to my sister on the phone yesterday about all of this. We got around to the subject of mirrors and how having two mirrors directly facing each other can create a portal. She asked me if I had any mirrors facing each other in my home, to which I said, no, I don't think so. Then it hit me. I went to check the spare room, and as it turns out, I do. I have some wardrobe doors with mirrors on them, but I haven't put on the wardrobe yet, and I've just leaned them up against the side of the wardrobes until I got around to fixing it. The mirrors are directly facing each other, and they're in the spare room where the dark energy lingers. I'm thinking I should just move the mirrors and cleanse the house again, but is there anything else I should do to make sure it's definitely gone? My ghosts hate my morning alarms. So I've been semi-aware of something, quote-unquote, in my house for a little time now. Usually just taps here and there, noises throughout the house, strange feelings, and something setting off my motion detector when nobody's home. Lately, though, I've discovered that whatever is in my house doesn't like my alarms going off in the morning. The first experience was with I guess it was a couple weeks ago. My alarm had been going off in the morning, but I hadn't woken up properly until I heard an irritated voice say my name as if to wake me up because my alarms weren't doing the job. The second time, same thing again, alarms going off, but I wasn't getting up. And then I heard something hard fall on the floor in my bedroom. I got up to investigate, but nothing was on the floor at all. The latest one was the other morning. I'd snoozed my alarms a few times because, I guess they attended to write alarms. I snoozed my alarms a few times because I couldn't be bothered to get up. And when I finally did wake up properly, I realized that I hadn't heard any more alarms. I went to grab my phone only to discover it had been taken off charge and thrown across the room, too far away to just have vibrated off the side table. Is this something I should worry about? Basically, one day I was just sitting at home chilling in my bedroom watching YouTube. Then I needed to use the toilet, so I opened my door, and the minute I stepped into the hallway, I felt this deep chill, as if someone poured something cold onto my back. I stood in the hallway motionless, and my insides told me I needed to run back into my room. So that's exactly what I did. I sat in my room completely still, waiting for the feeling to go away. It eventually went away sometime around 12 p.m. Can someone please tell me what happened and if I should worry about it? Update. I was sitting in my house again reading a comic, and then I got up from the couch and began to go upstairs, as that was where my bedroom was, when I heard my mom call out my name and told me to come upstairs, except her voice sounded wrong in a way that I can't explain. I almost did, but then I remembered my mom had died when I was 3. With the most calm voice I could really make, I said, "No," and left the house. She started screaming and yelling the phrase, "Get upstairs, it's too hot." About 3 times before, she subtly started calling my name again. I'm currently sitting outside at a park in my complex. It doesn't even feel like my complex. There's multiple things different about it. For example, there are no trees at all. There's no buildings. And there's more storm drains than there were supposed to be. I want to move away, but I'm only a minor and I don't think my father would believe me if I told him this story. What should I do? Waking precognitive dream/vision. The vision or waking dream, or whatever you want to call it, happened in the summer of 2004. I was driving home from work on a route that I could drive with my eyes closed. I was so used to it. When my mind began to wander, I saw me and my husband going into my stepdaughter's room and finding her hanging in the closet. I was a paramedic at the time, so I saw myself performing each step involved in the beginning of the process of CPR. My husband was hysterical. I knew that 911 had been notified. I just kept focusing on performing CPR, thinking about the crew who's about to get the call. And then I snapped out of it, and I felt awful for thinking such a horrible thing about her, like I had fantasized about what was happening and wanted it to become real. No way did I feel that way. Almost exactly a year later, it actually came true. All of it. We went to check on her and noticed her CD player was skipping and she wasn't fixing it. We went into her room and ultimately found her hanging in the closet. My now ex-husband begged me to save her, so I took a deep breath, pried her mouth open and began CPR. As I performed CPR, another person who happened to show up right as I was running downstairs for the phone actually ended up being the one who was talking on 911, replaying everything I told her to relay. We never spent another night in that apartment. We stayed in the same complex, but we stayed with family while we were waiting for them to get our new apartment ready for us. That was on 9/3/2005. I still wonder if there have been any paranormal experiences in that room. I had a visitation dream a couple weeks later. That was really sweet. I felt awful for having thought it. Then when it came true, I felt even worse. It's not the only prophetic experience I've had, though. An entity grabbed my legs. To preface this, I, a 29 female, live in a home built in the 60s with my mom, a 51 female, and roommated with a 62-year-old female and my husband, 38-year-old male. Our landlord's father passed away not too long ago, and things have been going on since we had our bathroom remodeled. A year ago it was small things, items being thrown, hushed whispers heard at any time of the day, and a shadow of a child seen in a few rooms. Last month, we had the master bathroom remodeled, as it was causing structural damage to the house, and things have been crazy ever since. The first night after the remodel, I could smell someone smoking right in the living room. Granted, our roommate smokes outside and doesn't ever smoke in the house. The smoke smell would follow me into the bedroom, where it would feel like someone was standing over me, constantly blowing cigarette smoke into my face day and night. Then it led into me not being able to walk into my bathroom without letting the air know that I was coming in. Because if you don't, whatever it is in there, gets so angry that the air gets heavy. The day I was grabbed, it was roughly 4 or 5 a.m. since I worked the night shift, and I was trying to go to bed. I was laying next to my husband when I felt a rope or a tail wrap around my left knee, then switch to my right. I was so scared I ended up smudging the whole home, salting the doorways into and out of the house, and putting salt on the 3 mirrors in the bathroom. I don't have any spirit board or anything like that to communicate with on the other side, and I don't want to. There's still hushed conversations happening, but I don't smell smoke anymore, and nothing has ever tried to touch me since. I went through a glitch in the Matrix on the London Tube. This happened in 2015 on the Piccadilly line in the London Underground. If you're not familiar with it, you might want to get a map of it. So I was just going home after seeing a friend's concert in North London, and at the time I lived around Dollis Hill in Northwest. I was traveling back with a friend of mine, and we were both extremely sober. I only had a small beer at the start of the evening and drank water during the event. I hadn't smoked nor taken any sort of drugs, nor have we ever been psychiatric patrons. It was sometime after 11 p.m. and we were a bit concerned about the underground closing up, so we were trying to figure out the best route. As we approached King's Cross Street and Pancreas STN, we decided that maybe it would be best for us to change with the Jubilee line at Green Park, only to change ID at the last second. We got up from our seats toward the exit, and the train door closed right in front of us. Not a big deal. We decided to get off at the next station, Russell Square, as it was a small station, and it would have been easier after all to go back to King's Cross, where we had more chances to find trains still running. So we wait a few minutes for the train to get to the next stop. The monitors on the train and the voice over the speaker telling us that destination will be the Heathrow Airport. The train reaches Russell Square, its name spelt out in the ceramics that decorate the walls. The doors open right in front of the short corridor leading to the staircase where the man is mopping the steps in preparation for closure. We go over the bridge and wait on the platform, right in front of the billboard advertising David Bowie's latest release. I believe it was his last of his compilation albums. The monitor tells us that our train is only 2 minutes away and will terminate at Cockfosters. As usual, my friend and I can't help but chuckle. The train arrives, we both get in, doors close behind us. A couple of minutes go by and I can't help but notice the people with their luggage. That for whatever reason, they didn't seem like they were coming back from the airport. The monitor says, "This is the southbound train to Heathrow Terminal 1, 2, 3, and 5. Must be some kind of mistake. So why is the recorded voice announcing the same? And why is it saying the next stop is Russell Square? My friend and I are a bit confused, so we ask a couple with luggage for their destination Heathrow. They must be on the wrong train and the computer system must have somehow fucked up. There's no other explanation. We wait patiently for our train to get to King's Cross, St. Pancras. However, as the light starts coming in from the windows, we can't help but notice the same ceramic patterns of Russell Square. Its name spelt on the wall. Once again, the door opens in front of the same corridor and the same guys cleaning the stairs. I swear he glanced at me in a way that made me clear that he'd seen me already. Once again, we're greeted by David Bowie's face, and once again, we get on a train to Cockfosters. Only this time, we're not thinking about juvenile puns. We managed to both get home safely in complete disbelief, but sure that we've had the same experience. Nobody's ever been able to give an explanation of what happened. And I've done again the same route to find that it's perfectly okay. Shadow person follows us. My husband and I have been together since we were 16. We're now 24 with 2 kids. And this all started before I met him. His stepmom came into the picture when he was around 13, and brought with her my husband described as a satanic book. It gave everyone the creeps, and my significant other's dad decided to burn it, which resulted in ear-piercing screams when it hit the fire. After that, they started experiencing strange activity, such as items being moved. The most unexplainable was a laundry hamper that was found at the top of their roof. His sister also had an experience of being woken up to a black figure hovering over her, choking her. Her boyfriend at the time witnessed this. When my husband and I got together, I spent many nights with him. I always had a bad feeling over there, but what changed me from a skeptic to a believer was when I placed my phone on a TV stand, and not a minute later, my significant other watched my phone fall from the ceiling in the corner of the room. We moved into our first apartment together in 2018. Whatever it was followed us, and the activity went from sparse to almost daily. Unexplained footsteps, items not being where they should be, cabinets opening and slamming shut, doors opening and closing. We moved in 2019 and we were followed by this entity again. Nothing about the hype of activity changed, but this is when it started showing itself to us. The first time my husband and I were relaxing on the couch, which faced towards our dining area. The kitchen was behind the wall where we had our TV set up. I'm not sure what compelled me to stop our conversation and look in that direction, but what I saw chills me to this day. Peeking out from behind the wall that separates the living room and the kitchen was a shadow figure of a tall man. It stayed long enough for me to get a good look at it and know without a doubt it wasn't my imagination. As soon as I noticed it, it pulled itself back behind the wall. During the moment, I was more curious than afraid and pursued it. There was nothing in the kitchen. And when I think about it now, I wonder just how many times that this thing was spying on us. Why would it pull itself back into the kitchen instead of disappearing right then? Did it want me to follow it? Shortly after this incident, my daughter was born. The activity got worse again. It became a nightly occurrence that her door would open by itself. This also happened during her naps. Not only was my husband now seeing this figure too, but it started touching us and being vocal. One night while laying in bed, I dropped my phone off. While leaning down to grab it, I felt a hand stroke my arm. I'd also often feel like my husband was getting in bed with me and hear breathing in my ear, only to roll over and find myself alone. My husband also had his foot grabbed one night while playing video games. Night was when the most activity happened. Our daughter was waking up screaming over 20 times a night. Her doctor said it was the worst sleep regression she'd ever heard of. We moved again in 2021. Our very first night being there, I was unpacking the kitchen while my husband was putting our daughter down for bed. I turned around to see a huge shadow of a man go from one end of the kitchen to the other and disappear. Another night we were woken up to banging on our walls, which faded out into tapping. This was a wall that separated our room from our daughter's room. My husband decided to tack back. The tapping would repeat every pattern my husband did. We let our daughter sleep in our room that night, and when we woke her up, she pointed to the doorway and told us that there was a man. We moved in 2022 to our current residence. I'm not sure what's changed, but the activity comes and goes now. Sometimes there'll be a little bit of activity for months, and then it's a rush of seeing figures, doors opening and closing in front of us, etc., etc. I can say that this activity does pick up during stressful times. My daughter's now 4 and will occasionally bring up the shadow that visits during the night. Something has been following me almost my whole life. When I was 10 years old, I had very strange experiences. I think I brought something back with me. When I, a 44-year-old female, was a child, I would have strange experiences almost every night. As an adult, I'm still scared of the dark. I lived in the American Southwest. It began as constantly feeling like I was floating above my body at night. Sometimes I would see faces floating above me. Other nights I would sleepwalk, especially when there was intense thunderstorms. Still happens. And when I was 10, during a thunderstorm, the following happened. I woke up to an intense crash of thunder. My room was dark, and my younger sister, 6 years old, had woken up as well and had fallen out of bed. I helped her get back to bed and laid back down in mine. I was having some trouble falling back asleep because it was hot and semi-humid. Suddenly, everything got extra dark in my room and the air became very heavy. I tried to get up and yell for my parents, but I suddenly couldn't move. I could hear voices calling to me in the dark and almost thought that I could see something coming at me through the darkness. I closed my eyes to not look at it, and then I felt a very cold air blowing on my face. I opened my eyes, and the only way to describe it is that it looked like I was traveling at light speed through a wormhole tunnel. I freaked out, of course, closed my eyes and tried to scream, but nothing came out. The wind stopped, and when I opened my eyes, I was laying down still, but like nothing was supporting my body that I can recall. I was just floating in this dark void that was also illuminated at the same time. Suddenly, these tall white beings began to float towards me. Some of them began trying to talk to me, but I didn't understand them. Then more and more of them began showing up. They were transparent and tall, similar to the beings at the end of the Dark Crystal. I didn't watch that movie until I was 13. Imagine how badly that freaked me out. Two of the beings began to touch my head while talking to me and each other. I tried to scream again and close my eyes, but when I opened them, I was back to the wormhole tunnel. This time I could tell I was traveling faster and I was very, very cold. I blinked and suddenly felt like I was back in my room. I began screaming for my parents. I was scared and freezing. There was ice in my hair. My parents came rushing in and I was understandably very upset. My mom was pulling ice out of my hair. My dad was just staring at the ice like he knew something but didn't want to say. They managed to calm me down and tuck me back into bed even though my hair was sopping wet. 80s parents. My parents were obviously freaked out too, even though they tried to hide it. In the hallway, I heard my dad say to my mom that it was 88 degrees in the house and it didn't make sense that my hair was frozen the way it was. My mom wondered if I've somehow gotten into the big freezer, and my dad laughed. Then they went to bed, and I eventually fell asleep too. The next day, my mom wouldn't talk to me. I was scared still and also curious about what happened. I finally got a chance to talk to my dad about it, and he told me that he believed I somehow traveled to another plane of existence. Then he told me even though we all grew up Catholic, there were 10 levels our souls must pass through before we reach heaven. Essentially, he said he believed in reincarnation. He said every time we die, our souls go up one of these planes. If we were a good soul, we return as a better, kinder person, becoming better and kinder with each return. If we're bad souls, we return bad and worse until we become evil, eventually as we progress through the 10 levels. We do have a chance to turn things around, but that's essentially why we had a really horrible, i.e. Hitler, and very good people, i.e. Mother Teresa. In our current plane of existence, that is. He believed that I traveled to one of the other planes where souls were waiting to come back. The white beings I had seen were good souls protecting me from the bad ones. I'm sure I believed him at the time. My mom just told me to pray and still refused to talk about it. I asked my parents about this last year, as they both still remember that this happened. Since that happened, I've noticed that when people treat me poorly, bad things begin to happen to them. But it also works the opposite way. When people are nice to me, their life vastly improves. There are unfortunate side effects to the bad ones. Every time something bad happens, I'm plagued with bouts of sleep paralysis, nightmares, and night terrors. I don't find out about the bad things until after. During the sleep paralysis, I've heard a disembodied voice tell me that they are making sure things are set right, quote unquote. I've also heard it say, don't worry, they're paying for what they did. I never wish bad things on anyone, even people that have hurt me or wronged me. I've always shied away from confrontation, but this presence has always made them pay. It also has made bad situations good for other people that are kind to me. It's told me very vivid dreams about how it improves their lives. I could give many examples of this, and it only seems to apply to non-family members, and also to people that maybe really didn't intend to hurt me or make amends. Like one bad encounter won't cause any problems, especially if it was unintentional. I don't know how to deal with it though. It's hard to explain. I hope I at least gave enough information on what's going on.